Welcome to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast. This is an episode about pressure, and pressure doesn't create behavior, it reveals it. And understanding your internal operating system is going to be one of the things to help you figure out how to be able to navigate it. So, with that, I'm going to start with a promise. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why pressure isn't the enemy, it's a mirror. You'll identify your pressure entry points, recognize default behaviors, and walk away with one concrete step towards upgrading your internal operating system. So, with that, I am going to start with this. Kashaun, your core philosophy is that pressure doesn't create behavior, it reveals it. And before we get into the framework, give me the short version of your story. What put you on this path? I know from our conversation, you mentioned your wife Dominique had a conversation with you and it changed everything. I want to come back to that in detail because I think it speaks to something a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders miss. The people closest to us can see what we can't see, and that sets the scene for us.
Sean, thank you so much for having me on the Strategic Thinkers podcast. I'm happy to be here. I couldn't wait for this conversation to happen, recorded based on what we had in our pre-conversation. So, thank you so much. I look forward to this conversation. So, to start things off, we have to look at pressure differently. Most people even myself before I started this, most people have never been taught how to understand it. It's almost like the weather. We know it exists, we know it's there, but we've never really been taught how to understand it. Therefore, we need to recognize it. And what we need to recognize is that pressure does not create behavior, it reveals it. That's all pressure is. I did a workshop with Georgia Tech on Tuesday with their tech founders, and someone asked me about aren't there good pressures and aren't there bad pressures? I said that's a great question, but I'm going to say it again. Pressure does not create behavior. It reveals it. So that's what pressure is. You want to categorize pressure good or bad. Okay. But the thing is, pressure is neither good nor bad. It's
Hmm.
there to just reveal it. So that is my core philosophy, and that's what I believe, and I can't wait to jump more into it. Because when I think about, here's why I'm excited about this conversation. One of the things that you promise so many things, but the other thing that I would like to tack on for promising that this is a no judgment zone, and that's the beautiful thing about talking about pressure. When I talk about pressure, I'm removing this is not a character-based conversation. This is not me judging you as a person. We are solely looking at least from my standpoint, it's the internal operating system of the individual. That's what we're looking at. The system, like a cell phone, how we operate under pressure. Not really the cell phone itself, but the operating system as individuals. So the goal, at least one of my other promises today, is system upgrade under fire.
Got it. All right. Well, I want to circle back to the origin story because that gives people context. I know when you explained it to me, that conversation you had with your wife was one of those key pivotal moments that I think other people can actually relate to. So I want to circle back to that because we got a little bit more clarity on what it is, and this is a no judgment zone. But getting that clarity and that context, people love a good origin story, and understanding what brought it to mind for you and what you've done with it since then will help people understand how to be able to customize it to themselves as well.
Absolutely. And for the record, my wife is very diplomatic. She is very diplomatic. She will beat around the mulberry bush, and me, I am not that way. I'm direct. I'm going straight down the middle. She is, she's careful and delicate and flowery with her words. So that's what makes this conversation really unique because, we've been married over a decade, and I can probably count on one hand when she was this direct with me. so so when she had this conversation, I looked at her, I was like, "Who is this woman?" But it was a conversation that I needed overlooking the Pacific Ocean. She said to me, she named things that I was good at. She named things I wasn't that good at. She named things that I thought I was good at and wanted to be good at that I wasn't good at. And then she named things that I was remarkable at. And when she did that, she said, "You inspire me." And when she said that, I was like, "Wow." This is a woman who I lay next to, a woman who sees my vulnerabilities, who doesn't get to see the polished LinkedIn version, the backspace version before I hit.
Mhm.
She gets to see it all. So when she ran down and said, "Hey, you're not living up to your potential." And that was very unique because that's usually my stance. I'm usually I've said things to her. That's when I go out and speak. I spoke about or I speak about potential, and for her to say it to me, it was quite interesting because that realization didn't come easy to me. It really did because she said things to me that I needed to hear, that I did not want to hear at all. And she didn't shame me. She didn't. It was her way of encouraging me to change directions and focus on what I was put on earth to do. And then that conversation led me down to taking a closer look at me, taking a closer look at my experience, just taking a closer look at what I do. And what I do, meaning what I want to do and what I've been put here to do, but two different things. Because
Mhm.
what I've been put here to do comes easily. It comes naturally. And that's what she said. She said, Kayshawn, when you speak, you keep me at the edge of at the edge of the seat. She said, I love when you tell stories. And she said, I'm not just saying that, to stroke your ego. Because if you had a bad story or a bad joke, I'm gonna tell you. But she said, no, I love to hear when you express certain things. That really, Sean, really had me just to reflect on what direction I need to go in life. And not just reflect, she told me, she said, "Hey, Sean, you need to change directions." She said, "Right now," she said, "because the direction you're going in is not going to work." And that's not a good feeling that's not, you don't feel good. You don't want to hear that coming from your spouse. You want your spouse to be your cheerleader. But sometimes cheering looks different depending on the situation, but it doesn't mean it's not cheering. So
Right.
it wasn't a round of applause. It was, in order for me to continue giving you a round of applause, you have to pivot because if you don't, you're going to waste your potential.
Right in the ship, yeah. Making sure that you're both on the same path, going in the right direction. And that's the beauty of a partner. That's one of the reasons why I wanted you to walk through the story because you said no judgment zone, but that's a classic example of it being a no judgment zone. When you have people in your life that can speak to you honestly and have that real conversation, it's what allows you to be able to see things from a standpoint that you may not be able to see it. We get caught up in our routines, we get caught up in the day to day. And there's a saying, you can't see the picture from within the frame. Having someone be able to tell you what it looks like from the outside is what allows us to be able to make the corrections on the inside and then project it to the rest of the world in a way that we need that. And we need to be able to have people do that. So when someone that you care about is able to say that to you, it lands differently. My brother used to say, nobody cares about you except the people that care about you.
Yeah.
Getting that kind of perception and getting that from someone else, it lets you know what everybody else is looking at. And I imagine in that situation, we're talking about pressure, that raises up the pressure.
It,
It makes you go, okay, you know what? I need to make sure that the woman in my life is always looking at me the way that I want her to be looking at me. So I'm not only didn't, my grandmother used to say, did you hear what I said? And I would say, yes. And she said, but were you listening? So you not only heard her, you were listening. And you've taken steps to be able to make sure that you're not only correcting it within yourself, but you're helping other people correct it in their lives as well. So that was one of the reasons why I want to go back to the story because it's something that hit home for a lot of people, understanding the origins of it and then understanding how you got to this point, and then everything that you've done with it. Because now they can kind of stick their chest out and be proud of you the same way I was when I heard the story.
Yeah, and she is. And you're right. It wasn't an easy situation. It's difficult when the people next to you not only see the cracks within your system, but also share the cracks. They expose the cracks to you because, it's difficult looking in the mirror. Looking in the mirror is difficult. But here's the deal. If you're getting ready to go to an event and you dressed up and you see a stain on your shirt, do you yell at the mirror for revealing the stain? You don't. The mirror there is just a revealer. So my wife, at that point, she revealed the cracks that I neglected to see or didn't want to see.
All right. Well, we're talking about revealing pressure as a revealer. It reframes what we think we know. One of the things that we talked about and we can get into now is why pressure is universal and inescapable and why that actually is useful. And then there's the difference between pressure creating behavior and then revealing it. So I know one of the things that we talked about in our strategy session was you said pressure was here before you even born and it'll be here after you're gone. So if we can't escape it, the real question is, what are we going to do about it? And then again, you talked about the cracks. So give me a real example of what it looks like when someone's business or personal life starts to reveal those cracks and then what they can do about it. We talked about it from your side, but now let's talk about how someone else can start to see themselves in the story and some of the things that they can start looking at doing about it.
So to give you an example, and somebody, well, your listeners may relate to this. So what does it reveal? Okay, I'm not gonna. I know we probably slated for about 30 to 40 minutes, maybe an hour. I can't. That's not enough time to delve into the nuances of what pressure reveals. However, to give you an example, prior to this call, my company, we're working on an app right now. So I'm working with the developer, and I'm doing some things on the back end. And Sean, I was getting so frustrated. I wanted to punch a hole in my computer, and dead serious. Like I was getting so annoyed, right? Frustrated. But because I'm able to map out where pressure is hitting me, all right? Pressure, the first for me, it may be different for you or different for your listeners, and actually it probably is because all of us have a unique pressure entry point. For me, pressure hits my body first, right? That is where the threat takes place. That is where the breach in my system takes place. So I may feel I may feel tension in my jaw, my fist balls up, or I may get a headache. That's my headache. It comes up first. That is the very first thing that happens to me.
Mm,
And it may be for you, maybe for your listeners. So becoming aware of what is happening, and then it just, just move through my entire system. So because pressure hits my body first, what is it revealing to me? Hey, I need to stop, because if I continue to go, I told you I felt like hitting my screen and punching it.
mm,
If I would have continued on, I literally would have punched a hole in my my computer screen. Now, remember, guys, I said this is a no judgment zone. So no judgment zone episode. So that's what I felt like. So the thing is, the question is, what is it revealing about yourself? What is it revealing about me? Well, it's not that I don't know how to handle pressure, but maybe I'm not the person for the job to work on developing this app. Maybe I
mm,
move it to someone else. Am I making sense? When you're walking through a specific task, or you walking through, or you want to get, let's say you're going after funding, all right? And maybe you're not a fundraiser, but as a founder, that's one of the things that we do. We raise money. We are salesmen. But the very thought of going to ask somebody for money, you're panic stricken. You feel like you're about to pass out. So what do? Number one, you become aware of that feeling, and then you just default it to somebody else. Hey, you ask, hey man, hey, excuse me, miss, or your co-founder, or somebody in your organization, or you watch YouTube
mm,
videos, or you listen to podcasts like Strategic Thinking Podcasts, and you learn different. So that's what pressure does. Pressure reveals where there are inadequacies in your life,
mm.
or in your system, excuse me.
Okay. Well, there's a lot to unpack in that. I'll circle back to uh, pressure doesn't create cracks, it reveals them. One of the things that I tell people when they're even considering going into entrepreneurship or any other the pathways of thinking about what's next is there's two basic pathways that you can take. There's preventative measures and reactionary solutions. Reactionary solutions is paved with a lot of pressure.
Yes.
Preventative measures is something where there's the pressure, but it's planning for the things that you know that you can control. And then it's leaving room to be able to deal with the things that were unforeseen. So it leaves room for you to be able to say, okay, I've thought about every single scenario that I could think of. I've checked those boxes. Now, when something comes up, because it's not an if, it's a when something comes up that I couldn't necessarily see coming, I have the bandwidth to be able to deal with that. The other part that stood out to me in what you were saying was understanding that sometimes pressure is on someone's head because they're they're trying to do something that isn't their gift. It's not what's natural to them. So one of the things that when we start getting to a point where if we're talking about the business journey, one of the things that stands out is once someone gets to a certain point where they start to get to growing and scaling, they realize they can't do it all themselves. They don't need to wear every single hat. Like that's pressure. Trying to do all the rest of that will lead to burning
It
out.
will.
And it's universal in life. Like you can't take on everything. The smartest thing that you can do, and this is what people on the corporate side have learned, and one of the things that I like to explain to people through the podcast and just in general is you don't have to be the smartest person. You don't have to be great at every single thing. Those people have gotten smart enough to be able to know, you know what, that's not my gift. And what I can do is I can outsource it to someone who has that gift. And my gift has to be knowing who to be able to hand that to. And that's what I heard in what you were saying.
And you're right. You have to be able to step back. And once again, removing the shame because we're talking about the
Hmm.
operating system. When individuals feel like they have to ask for help, there is a sense of shame that comes over them. They feel like their identity is being challenged because they don't know everything. And I had to overcome that. I had to get to the point, maybe you, Sean, and maybe your viewers and listeners, where here's the deal: you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I don't know where that comes from. You do not have to be the smartest person in the room. And the other thing you don't have to do, you don't have to impress no one. You don't have to impress anyone. You just do what you're good at and call it a day and work your way through that. Once you try to impress others, now you're putting unnecessary pressure on yourself. So yeah,
Absolutely.
so that's the conclusion I had to come to where you just go out and you just be you. But when you're trying to impress someone, once again, pressure doesn't create behaviors, it reveals it. The question becomes, why are you trying to impress someone? What has happened throughout your life where you felt the need to impress people to get a perceived desire that you
Yeah, yeah, I would say, one of the things that I again, that I try to explain to people is their situational awareness. There are certain things going on in your situation that it's making you feel like I need to impress that person. If you understand what that is, then it allows you to be able to address it in a way that is more productive and healthier. But if it's from a place of imposter syndrome or insecurity, then that's an internal thing to correct. Because the moment you try to impress someone, then you're taking the power away from yourself and you're putting it in the hands of someone that
absolutely,
now is in a position to be able to weigh in on something that isn't their passion, it isn't their purpose. So
absolutely.
I have an internal rule of the only person I'm technically trying to impress is either my partner or tomorrow's version of me.
Oh, that's it. That's it. And you're right about your partner because that's who I'm trying to impress.
Yeah, we can't leave them out of the equation. Like if you're solo dolo, that's all well and good. But when you have that partner, the thing that I remind people, especially early stage businesses, is there's a shelf life.
Right,
People will give you the buy-in and say, you know what, I support you, I'm with you on everything that you're trying to do. But if you don't have a handle on it, over time, they're looking at you and seeing that you don't have a handle on it. And that ratchets it up to pressure because at some point they will come back and say, like, listen, you said this was going to take you 6 months. It's been a year.
right.
Like, how long am I supposed to allow you to take things off of your to-do list and add it to my to-do list? So,
And the other thing, Sean,
uh,
is
mhm,
it took a year, but you telling me you said it was going to take 6 months, but there are no check-ins. So even if it's going to
that
take
part.
a year, how about you provide check-ins? But sometimes when the pressure is heavy, we avoid heavy conversations. We avoid difficult conversations. We fall back into, patterns that has been with us for years. For some people, when things get hard, what do? They avoid. So as a founder, when you thought you were going to have an investor, that didn't happen. Okay. That happens. When you thought you were going to have retail space, that didn't happen. When you thought you were going to get a buy-in from your niche market, that didn't happen. When you thought you was going to be an influencer and it didn't happen. Those things are okay. That is the natural progression of business. Business is an evolution. You don't snap your finger and all of a sudden, I don't care what social media does. I don't care what LinkedIn does, Instagram does, TikTok. No, you don't go, if you give somebody $47.99, all of a sudden, now you have this email list of 1 million people. No, it takes time to get there. So with that being said, when those hurdles come up, check in with your partner, check in with your family, check in with your employees, check in with your board and your investors. Most people are understanding. If you said it was going to take 6 months as a founder, we like to, as the kids say, we like to juice. I mean, if you say it takes 6 months as a founder, it's really going to take about a year, right? That in layman's terms. So if you say it's going to take a year, it's going to take 16 months. So if you say it's going to take 6 months and it doesn't happen, that's okay. Just stay communicative and keep people involved, keep people aware, because as you just spoke about, the shelf life, that shelf life, it will expire. And when it expires, it's hard to, to get it back.
It can be. It can be. Let's unpack what you said a little bit more. It's not really about your character as much as it's about your system. So if your operating system isn't set up properly, then the issue isn't your character, unless you just choose to avoid those conversations. So it's not about your character, it's about your operating system. And when you remove the shame from the conversation, then it's easier to have those conversations. I think people avoid the conversation because there's a level of shame attached to it. And really, what you're doing is you're adding pressure, and what you're really supposed to be doing is conveying information. So, pressure is just information. And the question is, why do you feel that pressure? Is it something where you said you were going to do something and you weren't able to do it? If you do those check-ins, this is why I believe in in like milestones and checkpoints, because it there are a lot of people that say, well, this is what my end goal is going to be. That's great. Do you know how many things are going to come up along the way? Whenever someone puts together systems and plans and all the rest of that, it's building it on things going perfectly. The reality is things aren't going to go perfectly. So you have to have those check-ins. You have to have those things that allow you to be able to say, all right, I'm only going to go this far. When I get to this point, then I'm going to stop. I'm going to reevaluate, and I'm going to check in with all the people that matter to make sure that they understand what's going on and that I can make sure that I still have that buy-in. And that's how you can extend that shelf life, and that's where you can relieve some of the shame and some of the pressure that's attached to, I said I was going to do this by this time frame, but I'm not really going to be able to do that. People understand it when they can see and understand what it is that you're trying to get accomplished, and you're keeping them involved in the process. It empowers them to be able to say, "Okay, well, you set that as a goal, but like, is that realistic? Is that a realistic goal?" That's where you can get that perception that you may not get because you may be putting a lot of pressure on yourself to say, "I got to make this happen." So situational awareness is something where, like, you look at your timeline, you look at the pressure that you have going on around you and internally, and you start to figure out how you can manage it. And you start to plan and map that stuff out. And as long as you have the sign off on all the people that are in your life and from yourself, where you know you're leaving room for not if, but when this doesn't go exactly the way that I planned, what's my plan for when it doesn't go the way I planned it? And as long as you have like that, then that gives you room to be able to relieve some of that pressure that you're talking about and build out an operating system that says, this is what's going to happen when things go well. And here's the wiggle room that I have when it doesn't.
I mean, you touched on so many points right there. And the thing is, trying to escape pressure is like punching the wind. You ever done that before? I mean, hey, I mean, punching the wind. I mean, it's
We all chuckle when we see someone do
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. It's funny unless you're a boxer and you're training, but you get so mad at you. That's what fighting pressure is, because it is escapable. But here's what I've learned, Sean, is that there are two types of behaviors. Two types of behaviors. There are behaviors that we intend, right? Those are our intentions. When things get tight, I intend to let people know that are close to me, my employees, my staff, my business partners, my investors, the bank, creditors, my spouse, my partner. I intend to keep them abreast with what's going on. Those are our intentions. However, the other behavior is when pressure spikes, those intentions go out the window. So the reason for that is when pressure spikes, when things get tight, we don't rise to our intentions. We fall back to our defaults. We fall back to what the brain has already programmed because when pressure spikes, the brain doesn't have enough time to create this new code. And all of a sudden you execute. The brain, when pressure spikes, its job is to keep things efficient. So it's going to fall back to what's already been there. And a lot of times, many of us, if not all of us, our default system is decades old. I'm 43 years old. I've been running on before I started this work. And when I started this work and I started examining myself, I'm like, man, I've been running on a default system, an operating system from, since I was in middle school. Our cell phones, our cell phones go through updates at least every 6 weeks. There's a security patch. There's a new security patch every single month that comes out.
Right.
However, as human beings, we are running on decade old systems and defaults. And then we get upset when we keep going around the same circle expecting a different result. So a lot of times founders just throw mud at the wall and see what happens, and not realizing it's it's them. I told a group of founders last week, I said, your business is nothing more than just a mirror of your internal system. If your business is chaotic, it's the founder. Everything trickles down. If the CEO of the organization, if things are all over the place, if the culture in the organization is when things get tight, we retreat, or when things get tight, we run around like a chicken without a head, just look up. Just look up and you see it. That's that leader's default system. And the other thing too, my default system or my pressure entry point could be my body absorbs the blow. It could be physical, but yours can be emotional, where you get your emotional landscape gets volatile and you get irritated, you get short, you get loud, you start yelling at people. If you're my leader, Sean, guess what's going to happen? I am going to experience your framework. I am going to be absorbed into your framework as your direct report. So when you get frantic, although my pressure entry point, it may not be emotional, guess what's going to trickle down to me? And that's what happens. As a default, not only do we have our own default, we don't share defaults, but other people experience our defaults. So when you're driving, I live in Atlanta. Where do you live, Sean?
I'm in New York.
So with that being said, when you're in the city and you're driving and the yellow taxis are going crazy and everybody's honking and doing everything and somebody flips you off, you are experiencing that individual's framework. And based on your default will be how you respond to that person. And if you have a faulty default, now here's road rage. Here's people ready to fight. Here's people not being able to handle things when pressure spikes. Because when we talk about pressure, and especially as a founder, we probably talking about we talk a lot about the heavy hitters, capital pressure. We talk about timeline pressure. We talk about founder tension. But we all experience micro pressures throughout the day. And the way we handle it determines the trajectory of our day. So we don't rise to our intentions. I know when I before I started this work, I know when people cut me off, this is what I would say, "Hey, Sean, you too old for that. You can't be acting like that." But then when people would cut me off, I defaulted back to the same behaviors. As a leader, when someone would call out from work, call out from job last minute, although they knew it's supposed to be 2 hours, when I was emotionally sober, already had the whole script planned out how I was going to handle it. But when they would call out right before the shift starts, now I'm blowing up.
It hits different. Yeah.
Right. Because we don't rise to our intentions. We fall back to our defaults, to the programming that's been there for years.
Yeah, I mean, I want to unpack default because some people will hear that and go, well, I mean, the default is something where one, I love the phone analogy because people can actually understand that and they can relate to it in a point where I get tired of seeing those updates, but also know the updates are for my benefit for the most part. It's something where when we're talking about defaults, that's where the perception kicks in. That's why I wanted to be able to cover your wife saying, you know what, listen, here's what I'm seeing. The default is us looking at what we've known. It's the signs, the signals, the patterns that we've experienced. And sometimes they can play to our benefit and sometimes to our demise. When we are looking at things that in a good way, it's I've been here before. If I beat it before, I can beat it again.
Mhm.
But if it's a something where we're not using it to heal wounds or grow, it's, well, I've always been this way. It is what it is. Like, we've seen different variations of it. And when I hear it and when I see it, it's, okay, you still have some things that you need to be able to work through.
Yes.
Like, I'm listening to what you're saying. You're saying, like, what are people's default when they run into something? I get quiet. And I get quiet because I need to evaluate the situation because it's telling me that I missed something. So I'm going to sit back, observe, and see what it is that I missed. And before I start saying anything and having that visceral reaction of, well, I'm going to this and I need to reevaluate. I need to see what it is that I missed. Where was the blind spot? Like, what could this potentially cost me? Like, I need to understand the consequences, because consequences will definitely overcome any of the patterns, any of the signals, any of the default that we have, because defaults are basing it on old consequences.
Mhm.
It's not basing it on the new things. What something cost you before when you were like, well, I mean, if somebody did something I didn't like, then I do this. Okay. When you were younger, people would go, well, I mean, he's young. Like, he'll grow out of it. He'll this, he'll that. As every situation changes, so does the consequences. So the default is the default that you're basing on memory, but we have to do those updates. We have to remind ourselves, okay, well, what are these consequences going to cost me? I almost equate it to walking on a tightrope. When you first start, if you're closer to the ground, you don't have as far to fall. But as you start to build out your business, as you start to have more people that you're responsible for, that you're accountable for, and things like that, the pressure starts to rise, and you have to be more aware. So, like you said, if there's someone that has employees, that has a bunch of people that report to, it does flow downhill. And I know that there are people that I've worked with, and they were so cool in those situations that it made everybody else feel like, well, if he's not panicked, why am I panicking? Because if anything goes wrong, the honest reaction is they're going to be the ones to catch the brunt of it first. Now it'll work its way downhill, but like, they're going to be the ones that have to go in, talk to the client, talk to the other businesses, talk to whoever it is, and explain why things went wrong, and then they'll come back and figure out how to be able to fix it. So it does start at the top, and we do have to be aware of what's going on with this. I know sometimes being on the corporate side or just in general, sometimes where I feel like I know someone fairly well and they do something that's out of character, then that's when I say, okay, clearly you have some other things going on that I know nothing about. And that just became my new pattern, my new default, to go, I have no idea what you have going on. So whatever you have going on, one, that's a personal issue. So it's not for me to take it personal. And two, I can highlight it to you as diplomatically as possible so that you're aware of it. Because if you're doing it to me, you probably did it to somebody else. The difference is, I know if you're doing it to me, I'm more cognizant of how I have to be able to respond. 6'8", 6'9", 300 pounds. Like, I learned at the age of like 15, 16, I don't get to have an honest reaction. I don't get to be the guy that gets angry, because then I'm the angry black man. And if I raise my voice, someone feels like they've been threatened. So I don't get to have that response. And once I became aware of that, then it made me aware of a lot of different situations and how to be able to deal with pressure. Different people have different levels of consequence. My consequence is, if I lose it, well, I hear back about it like, oh, you threatened this person. Oh, you did this. Oh, you did that. And that's one of the things that I always try to point out to people. It's not just in business, it's with the audience, it's in life in general. We know what we think something looks like. We have to be mindful of what other people see it as. And if we don't necessarily have to take it as gospel, but we do have to be cognizant of it. I know I've seen women walk with their arms crossed out in the streets and all kind of stuff. And it's like, darling, I understand you probably, I don't know, maybe a block ahead, somebody said something to you and it pissed you off, but like, do you realize like you're cutting yourself off to the world
Yeah.
walking around like that with the screw face on when, maybe it was just that situation, a new block, new situation. So I think people should be aware of what their default is and how it may be perceived. So long way around, but I wanted to kind of highlight that because people will say their default is, well, I've always been this way, and they come up with excuses and platitudes for it. But
That's
the perception of how it's received
that's
is
exactly
going to
right.
dictate so much of your life and have you spoken about in rooms that you're not in, that it affects your life in ways that you don't get a chance to be able to make right because they took it some kind of way. without you having any kind of say in being able to explain yourself or anything like that. So be very mindful of the default. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure I stopped there and highlight the importance of what it is that you're talking about. The default is something that is good, but it's also something that could be to our detriment. So with that, I'll hand it back to you because I want to put some context around it so that people can understand. When you say default, I need people to understand like what that means and what it could actually cost them.
And let me let's go even a little further. You said you said you work with people that you thought you knew them well, and then when something happened or you seen them, you said, "Oh wow, you're acting out of character." And let me just pause right there. When pressure spikes in a person's life, they don't mutate into someone new. They don't mutate into a different person. That doesn't happen. That's just not that's not the way it works. And that's why when we kicked off this episode, it is pressure does not create behavior, it reveals it. So when you say they're acting out of character, that's not true. They're actually acting based off of their default responses based off of pressure. So if someone is snappy and you've never seen it before, that's because pressure hasn't crossed through a threshold that that required them or influenced them to respond that way. And you may say, "Oh man, this person is always nice." Yeah, let stuff hit the fan, and you get to see a different type of person. You get to see their true self. That's their true self. It's not the honeymoon phase. People say that, when you first start a job, when you first get in a relationship, when you first get a dog, when you first get every
They're
yeah,
representative.
they say that is the honeymoon phase, the representative. But when stuff hit the fan, and I chuckle at at our sons when they start dating girls and oh, she's the nicest thing in the world. And in the back of my head, I was like, okay, oh, we'll see. Wait till the rubber meets the road. Wait till she enters into a pressure saturated moment. You get to see her true self. And we all have that. So the thing is, when you talked about defaults, is recognizing what do you do every time pressure spikes. We talking about mini pressures, or we talking about big pressures. Very seldomly, it has to be cataclysmic in order for pressure to just hit the system all at one time. It doesn't work that way. Pressure works as it is sequential. So it's sequential, but it's also not situational. So if someone curses you out at work, they're going to go to their kid's school and the teacher's going to say something. They are going to let a few curse words slip out as well. Why? Because pressure does not create the behavior. It reveals it's not a situation. You may say, well, when this person is in a professional setting, they act this way. Well, that's because they haven't crossed the threshold yet. I'm telling you, when they pressure crosses that threshold, or I like to say it this way, when they hit that 212 degree, that boiling point, you get to see how they really operate. When pressure hits, you get to see someone's true nature. Put someone underneath the gun. Put someone under, we call it the law of compression. When you're compressing time, when you're compressing deadlines, when you're compressing things that need to happen, when things that really matter, stack them all together. I call them pressure stacks. And when you stack those pressures together, you get to see, you really do get to see how people really operate when they don't know. But once people become aware of their pressure entry points, there are certain interventions that people put in place where they're able to maneuver and work through that pressure. Like you said,
Mm,
quiet. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. And it works for you. But if your quietness led to avoidance, then that's a problem. When you're experiencing pressure in your business and you go quiet, ready or silent, and people are looking at you like, come on. Are you going to chime in? Are you going to provide are you
mhm,
going to some answers? And you're just sitting there like, yeah, I'm waiting for you to say something. And they're looking at you like, yo, you the boss. Say something. That's when it becomes a problem. But if you stay quiet to analyze, you allow time for your prefrontal cortex to analyze the situation. That's when you have a healthy default and not a faulty default. Now, once again, we're not talking about character, so I don't want people to feel, oh my gosh, why do I? No, 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 no. It's your operating system. Once again, our phones go through updates, not because the phone is bad, because it's time for another update to keep the phone running at an optimum pace and also to keep any security breaches from taking place. So when you know your default response and when you know how your operating system responds to pressure, then you're able to navigate and you can say, hey, when this happens, this is what I need to do. Because like stated, we don't rise to new defaults, Sean. We rehearse our way there. And what I mean by that is you don't go and fix the roof when it's raining. That that doesn't make sense. So you practice certain interventions in low pressure moments. When you're sitting at home, when you're watching TV, when there's nothing going on, you practice those different interventions because when pressure spikes, you have to prepare long before pressure spikes you have to decide and prepare long before when pressure spikes who you are going to be. Because when we see how you respond, the fire has already started. We're just seeing the smoke.
Fair. Fair, yeah. I naturally attach it to consequences because anyone can say, this is who I am, this is what I do. But when the consequences kick in, then that's when it tells people what somebody's really about. So I find that people say, "Oh, well, if this ever happened to me, I would do this." And my thing is, I don't make those kind of statements because I need to understand the surrounding circumstances. When I understand the surrounding circumstances, I can say, "Okay, well, based on those, this is what I would do in this situation," because that's what's telling me what the pressure is. So I've always been one that like I enjoy a certain level of pressure because I feel like, you know what, I think a lot of things through. As an overthinker, I think a lot of things through. So when a new scenario comes up, it's like I may not have thought of that one, but I've checked enough boxes to be able to tell me, well, this is what I would do for all of these other things. This is a new one. And it's great because now I get to add that to the list of things where I can say, well, I've seen this before. And if I haven't seen it before, I've seen a version of it. Now, how would I, by process of elimination, say, well, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, but maybe I could do this. So, yes, planning for it is definitely something that more people should be looking at. One of the other things I heard in what you said is when the pressure hits, we don't rise to the occasion, we fall to our
Yes.
defaults. And that's a key point for people to understand. It's really important to understand that your default served you once. The question is it still serving you? And that's where those updates come in. I used to be someone with a very short temper. And as I got, like I said, as I got taller, as I got bigger, I realized system update. I don't get the liberty of being able to get hot when somebody does something.
Yes.
When I get quiet, my thing is, you know what? I'm gonna give you the understanding of don't take this as me not having an answer. Take this as me thinking through what it is that I'm going to say because how I respond is going to affect, there's going to be consequences. It's going to affect both of us in ways that I need to think through whether those consequences are worth whatever it is that came to mind. So yes, if there are people that get quiet, you still have to communicate why you're getting quiet. So people don't just think that you don't have a response. It's letting them know I value your opinion. I value this relationship. I value whatever it is that you are to me enough. Where I actually want to think about what it is that I'm saying. It's a lady used to say, chew your words.
Yes.
If you don't like the way it tastes,
Yes.
don't serve it up to anybody
Yes.
else. So yes, it's think through what it is you're trying to do. And then there are a lot of people out there living from their wounds. And there are unhealed people that aren't realizing that something's a trigger to them. And when they don't know that it's a trigger and they get triggered, then it's a reaction. It's not something that they plan for. It's them kind of, like you said, falling back to that default. So
Yeah.
be very, very aware. Self-awareness is one of those things that's really, really important when you're talking about pressure. Because if you don't understand what your triggers are, if you don't understand the things that will set you off or how you deal with certain situations, you can make a lot of claims. And then when the situation comes around, that's when it goes back to where I was saying, like, oh, well, someone's acting out of character. I know that people give me their representative, and I will give them the liberty of, okay, that's what it is that you're saying. If you can hold up your representative, I'll honor that being your representative. When the rubber hits the road, that's who you are.
That's who you are.
And at that point, I always say the trivial reveals the trajectory. So I look at what somebody does on a small scale. So if I see somebody doing something and they're trying to get over on somebody and they're doing it on a small, oh, well, it's not going to bother them. Oh, it's not going to cost them that much. If you're doing it on that level, what would you do when it did cost something?
Right.
So for me, I'm always looking at stuff like that and going, okay, well, I already know who you are.
Right.
It's just, it hasn't cost me anything yet. So when I have those conversations and I'm saying, well, that's what it to that person is saying they are. Thing is, you are until you aren't.
Sean,
And I can't be upset with them. I can only be upset with myself if I saw the little things and I ignore the little things and say, well, they did that to them, but they didn't do it to me.
let me say this real quick. Just once again, I wanted to interject. And sorry for cutting you off. When you say I know who you are, when we say I know who you are, I don't want people to say I don't want people to. We're not saying we know who you are. What we're saying is we know what system you're operating out of.
Yes.
This is no judgment. It's just that there are some updates that need to take place in your system, and if you are unaware of the system breach, or where breach takes place in your system, you will just constantly run on a really, really faulty system. And then you will have you're vulnerable at that point. You're vulnerable. Your system is vulnerable to anything. I mean, any hacker could get into a vulnerable, and that's what pressure is. Pressure is a hacker. But when you when you're running on outdated system, it will breach every single window of the house. It will breach everything, and all of a sudden you'll be offline. You ever know people that say, you know what, I can't do it. I'm done. I'm shutting down. I just can't do it anymore. You ever met somebody or heard somebody say that? And you like, what happened? They just went completely offline. Radio silent. They are just done when pressure spikes. So that's what I just wanted to clarify that, because when we say know who you are, people can get defensive. And I don't want people to get defensive when we're talking about their operating system. It is your operating system. That's just it. You are just running on, and all of us are running on either operating system that's up to date or running on an operating system that's outdated. And it is
Yeah.
if you're operating, or if your defaults haven't run parallel with the level of consequences that you are presented with on a daily basis, that's another surefire way to for you to see that your defaults are outdated. I mean, one of the best ways. I'm sorry. So one of the best ways is, I would say this, in an emotional relationship. So, partner, if your partner yells at you or you're having an argument, and for the last 10 years, it's been not only the same argument, but you say the same exact words. Like if she says something to you, then you say this. Why did you do it? Well, I had to get the last say. Well, buddy, how far has that gotten you? What divorce? This is my fourth divorce. Why? I just can't keep my mouth closed.
There's a common denominator in that. Yeah.
And this is what people say. You said it. You said it earlier in the episode. Well, this is what people default to. Well, this is just who I am. This is the way I've always been. That's an excuse. That is
Yes, it
a
is.
lazy excuse not to do the work on yourself. And one of the biggest things you talked about awareness, I'm going to talk about ownership. Is owning your defaults. If you become nasty under pressure, say it. I become nasty under pressure. I get irritable. People don't like being around me. All right, now that you have said it, now it's time to work on it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's I wanted to talk about that, and you talked about wounds, and I want to go back to scars as well, because understanding our defaults brings up a powerful distinction. Are you living from your wounds, or are you living from your scars? Because when you live from your wounds, you're still bleeding. That becomes your
Hmm.
identity. I mean, think about this. Most of us have burnt our hand on a stove. You've gone as a kid, even as an adult. You go in there, you burn the stove is hot. Oh, you touch it, and what happens? There's a wound that's created. All right, there's a pus. It may even start bleeding. And when you live from your wounds, the ticking of the gas stove, or the buttons on the oven, anything that's related to that stove is a trigger.
It's a trigger point.
Is a trigger for you. You just can't get over the fact that you were burnt 10 years ago. Everything that you do is related and centered around being burnt. Why do you eat out all the time? Oh, I can't be in the kitchen. Why? Oh, I got burnt 10 years ago. Yeah, what?
There's a lot of ways to go around that. Yes.
So, but then when you have someone who lives from their scars, they experienced it, they are healed from it, and then that wound becomes instructive. So now, instead of running from the kitchen, they go to get the kitchen mittens. They put it on their hand. They are prepared. Why? Because they experienced something. That experience taught them a lesson, and they were able to not allow that experience or that wound to become their identity. They didn't allow it to calcify. They observed, they analyzed, and then they took action. Hey, what could I do to still experience the benefit of the oven, but not the burn from the oven?
Yeah. Yeah. People, there are healed people, there are people that are a work in progress, and there's some people that have, as we've been talking about, that will say they're set in their ways. There are different ways to be able to approach these things. I've gotten to the point where, like, I've got less time to more time. I've seen enough years to be able to go. I stopped taking those years ago. And the way I stopped taking L's years ago was everything is a learning moment. When you become a student of life and a student of the game, it's telling you something. Are you paying attention to what it's telling you? Because if you're paying attention to what it's telling you, oh, I touched that stove and I got burned. What are all the other ways that I could do that where I don't have to worry about getting that experience again? And that goes back to precautionary measures and reactionary solutions. People that are reacting to something haven't necessarily taken any measures to avoid the consequences of what comes up. They're reacting in real time, and they're reacting in real time is their default. It's the pattern. It's the thing that says, well, if this happens, then this is cause and effect. That's what this gets you. So it made me chuckle to myself when you were saying, like, if in relationships, if someone's having the same argument over and over again, I'm not having that same conversation all over again. I'm just not. Like, if that's when I believe you believe it, and all these other things start to kick in, where it's like, you know what? If you like it, I love it. If it matters to you that much, then it is what it is. Like, you can have that. It doesn't matter enough to me for me to argue with you about something that maybe that's a boundary, maybe that's a triggering point. We can have a conversation about the trigger, and I'll use that as a segue to talk about pressure entry points and finding where it gets in, because that's part of what you were talking about, to say, if you can identify what these triggers are, if you can identify where it came from and why you feel that way, then it opens up the door for you to be able to do something about it. Like, once something happens, the follow-up question for people that are moving in, and for people, let's just stick with the operating system thing. When a system crashes,
Mhm.
once you're able to get the system back up, then you have to put something in place to make sure it doesn't crash again.
Yes.
That's the update. Like, okay, well, that happened. So now I know that that's something that can happen. How do I patch it so that I can make sure that that hack doesn't happen again? That's where identifying what those entry points are. That's where identifying where those triggers are starts to be able to help people grow, evolve, and start to get to the point where they're able to deal with pressure in ways that they never thought that they could. So what's a pressure entry point? Well, let me put it like this. What a pressure point entry point is, and why identifying your changes everything. Like, how do you diagnose what works and what it reveals? Because we're talking about it, but, like, let's package it up so that, like, it's a soundbite. Somebody knows exactly where to listen for it and go, you know what, that's the answer.
No, you're right. So, pressure entry point is where your body absorbs the blow first, and how to find out your pressure point, the individual pressure point. I created a diagnostic. The diagnostic is on my website, which is five stages. The word five stages of yes.com, and you click on it. PSI snapshot, and it's 12 questions. It's easy. It's easy to get through, and from there, you can determine how pressure flows through your body and flows through your system. And once you take the PSI, you're going to get a report, an in-depth, dense report on how to proceed with the intervention. So the one I'm really going to delve into is physiological activation. The reason I'm going to delve into that, because there was a recent recent diagnostic that we did, where we found out that we discovered 83% of founders were redlining physiologically while they were telling their teams, their investors, their spouses, that they were fine. They sound composed, they stayed engaged, and all the while their system was operating under massive strain. Uh,
It showed up, but they were shutting down. Gotcha.
so showed up but shutting down. And when you talked about it recently, you said, there was you give an example. Hey, if you see a guy or someone that's a leader, excuse me, that's composed in the moment when pressure hits, it doesn't mean their system is not under attack. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that once again, let's go back to the cell phone. Right. So my cell phone doesn't have any cracks right now. Right. So you think my phone is good. If I unlock my screen, I'm scrolling through, I could get through the apps. But if I go to the battery setting, my battery is getting beat up. Why? Because I have 50 apps open. I have 5 locations pinging on the battery. It's slowly draining the performance of my phone. But all the while, my phone looks good. My phone looks good. So that's the thing that we discovered. And that's the pressure entry point that I really want to hone in on because 83% of founders, so basically 8 out of 10 of your founders that are listening right now, probably their pressure entry point is physical. They may tense up, get a headache, jaw gets tensed, or eyes start twitching. They start profusely sweating. And when I did a workshop with Georgia Tech, one of the founders said when pressure spikes, he just start perspiring. He can't stop sweating. He just keeps sweating. And that is his sign that something, even before his mind can catch up to his body, something is going on. He's been triggered in that event. So one of the best ways, and I could talk about this one, and I'll leave the meat and potatoes for people to go on the website to take their PSI. One of the ways is physiological activation is when your body get hits first. Once again, your body absorbs the blow. And in layman terms, or here's the intervention. What I did today, like I said to your listeners and to your viewers and to you, Sean, I wanted to punch the screen. I knew what was happening. I felt it. I saw it in real time, just like probably you, because you're so analytical. When you sit back and you see how things, you can see how things will unfold and manifest itself if you take certain routes. So I seen how pressure was moving through my body. I got up, and my office is downstairs in my basement. I got up, I ran up and down the stairs. I went outside, got some fresh air, and I came back to prepare for this podcast. Because if I didn't do that, I would have gotten on really, really, really bothered. My system would have been
Right.
moving really, really slow. But in order to intervene when you're dealing with that heart palpitation, shallow breathing, oh my gosh, for me, when to give you another example that your founders may experience, I had an investor. He texted me. He said, "Hey, we need to talk." As soon as I read that text message, what do you think happened to me?
There's anxiety that comes with that unfinished sentence. Yes.
It flooded the system. I mean, I'm like, "Oh my God, what could it be? What could it be?" Now I'm imagining every possible wrong thing that it could be. And if I let pressure spread, then my whole system shut down. Then now when I get on the call, now I'm in a bad attitude. I have a bad attitude. Now I can't think straight. It's just different things of that nature. Um, when pressure hits your body, make a decision not to make a decision in that state. When you're activated, when your physical when your physical body is activated, make the decision not to decide. So in layman terms, do not decide when you're activated. So that's what I would like to give your listeners and your viewers today, and they can get the dense report on the website.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling my story. Like I said, I immediately start thinking about what are the consequences of me acting in real time. And very much what you said. When something happens, I visually see it in my head. And then I'm like, is that something I really want to play out in real life? So not making a decision in those type of moments can be to someone's advantage. I'll say an entry point is where pressure gets in before you're ready for it. And that's when it's like, okay, well, how do I deal with this? What do I do? And you don't necessarily have to panic. It's not asking you to come up with an answer right in that moment. It's acknowledging that that was something that you weren't necessarily prepared for. And the what's next is, okay, do I buy myself the grace and time to be able to say, you know what? Like, for example, someone gets on a call and someone asks a question that you weren't prepared for, an objection or something like that. You know what? That's a great question. I want to give it the value that it deserves rather than trying to give you an immediate answer.
Yeah.
So let me think about that and actually come back to you with something that's actually going to serve you rather than trying to serve something up now that may not answer your question the way that you're asking or the way that you need it to be answered. So you don't have to make a decision right then. Pressure is deceptive to the point where it makes you feel like you have to do something in the moment. You don't necessarily have to do something in the moment. What it's trying to acknowledge is that there's something that you didn't necessarily plan for, or there's a trigger or something that you weren't necessarily looking at. You can turn a bad experience, a wound into a something that's instead of it being a trigger, it's a learning moment. It's something that's healed. It's something that allows you to be better the next time. It's like getting frequently asked questions or objections when you're trying to pitch or something like that. Once you hear the question, you hear it more than once. It's like going back to the relationship and the argument. Like once I hear that that's an argument where like we're having that same conversation, I'm the common denominator in
Yep.
that. Well, I want to segue into ownership because that speaks to ownership. If you're the common denominator in something, then you own that situation, you're accountable for it. And that's where leading under pressure really starts to kick in. Like if you don't see yourself in the moment and what you can control, then you're leaving yourself up to someone else writing your own narrative, writing your story. And it could be hit or miss with that because everybody's got their own agenda. And if it doesn't align with yours, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So, mhm,
And you know the thing about ownership, I wrote a book, Five Stages of Yes for leaders, moving from hesitation to ownership. And while I was writing that book, what led me to write that book is people say, hey, well, people didn't take accountability for their actions. They're blaming it on other people. But then when people did take accountability for their actions, it sort of just stopped there. That was more so of, it's looking backwards, right? But when you say I take accountability or I take ownership, excuse me, I take ownership for everything. See, when people take accountability, it's this is their department, this was their task. They were tasked to complete it at this amount of time and it didn't happen. So because it didn't happen, hey, they own up to it. They say, hey, I take accountability for this. This is my fault. But when it's ownership, the leader, the founder says, it doesn't matter who was tasked with that. It doesn't matter
yes,
who was supposed to meet the deadline. I take full ownership because I oversee this company. I oversee this department. So ownership and accountability are two different things. Ownership is I had nothing to do with the task. I didn't even know what the task was about. But because my name is attached to this situation, I take full responsibility regardless of fault. So if it was Michael was supposed to come through on it. Michael neglected, it doesn't matter. I take full ownership on it. And now I'm going to work alongside with Michael. And then once this task is completed, me and Michael, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to
yes,
figure
yeah.
out where was the ball dropped? Why was it dropped? And does he drop balls all the time? Because if he does, he's operating from his default, which is irresponsible.
Yeah.
So that is
There's a patch and a system update that's gonna happen on the other side of that, absolutely.
it needs to. It needs to because accountability that's assigned by others and ownership is taken. It's assumed by you. It is just regardless of who is at fault. Let's go once again. Let's use a relationship because although this
Well, hold on for a second because I think there's a really good way to be able to describe this that you've already covered. You have a book, Rise Anyway.
okay
What is it, 20 stories of people who refuse to quit? I think we can reference that to be able to tell the story and also give people a place to be able to find more context and things like that as well. So you can absolutely say what you were gonna say, but there's also something that you've already said, put out there
no
that people could be able to benefit from as well.
no absolutely. And I wrote a book, one of a few, Rise Anyway, 20 stories of people refusing to quit. And it's actually is 19 stories, but the last chapter is the 20th story, and that one is for the reader. That one is for him or her. So it's 19 stories, but I put 20 stories because I included the reader in those 20 people. So 20 people of stories who refuse to quit, refusing to to be let refusing to let pressure become their identity. See, that's the thing. Pressure is going to happen, and it is inescapable.
It's
It's
inevitable.
it's
Yeah.
inevitable. Try to fight it if you want. You're gonna lose every time. I mean, you just got to be able to work with it, identify it, know how it affects your system, and move on, and don't let it spread from you into everybody else in the community because it does. The thing is, the individuals in that book, they were beaten down by life, homeless, divorce. I mean, the list goes on. The heavy hitters. Losing everything, getting fired. Going door to doors, sell. I mean, the list goes on and on. But regardless of the hand that they were dealt at that moment, they moved from accountability to ownership. They moved from, this is not. They moved from this is not fair to, regardless if it's fair or not, this is what my goal is. This is what my dream is. My dream is to be on TV. My dream is to write movies. My dream is to be a stockbroker. My dream is to come out with women pantyhose. My dream is to come out with food for children. Whatever that was, they moved from it's not fair to regardless if it's fair or not. I take full responsibility, even if I do everything I can and the business still collapse. I still take ownership over that situation because they refuse to let pressure become their identity.
Yeah. I wanted to cover that because there's a distinction between accountability and ownership. Accountability, I'll when you said it, there's a saying from a movie that stuck with me the first time I heard it, and then every time after, I just kept seeing more and more examples of it. There's such a thing as being guilty but not responsible, and responsible but not guilty. You can be guilty, that's accountability, and not responsible because you're not taking ownership of it.
That's exact.
You can be responsible but not guilty because ownership is I may not have been the one that did the thing, but I know I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to be held accountable from the founder standpoint of things not going the way that they were supposed to. So accountability and ownership are definitely different things. It's one of the reasons why I appreciated getting out of the corporate side and going over to the entrepreneurial side because I've been in situations where people had their own hangups and their hangups were starting to be something where their hangups were becoming my hangups. And my thing is, I don't struggle with that. So I'm not going to struggle with it because you struggle with it. We can acknowledge that this is something that you have to work on, but after that, then it's something where you have to take ownership of it, not make it everybody else's situation. So absolutely. I definitely wanted to cover the rise anyway because it's such a great example of realizing life isn't always going to be fair. You have to take accountability for the part that you have in ending up where you end up. But the ownership is the thing that gets you up out of that situation. It's the rock bottom of it all that says, okay, that happened. Now what? And when you can have that conversation and you can be realistic about it, then it leaves room for you to start to figure out what's next. And that opens up the door for other opportunities. And people will help people that are trying to help themselves. What they don't want to do is try to save somebody that's drowning because the only thing that happens is both people drown.
Yeah. And I'm a swimmer, but I'm not a great swimmer like that. I'm not a lifeguard, but I was.
Right. So, yeah, I wanted to make sure that we covered that part. And again, this is a no judgment zone. So we're not saying that if your default was fifth grade. I know some people that bless their hearts. I don't know how they've made it this far in their life without necessarily being able to take accountability, ownership. But people just keep swooping in and helping them in those situations, and they just never got to the point where they had to take that on themselves. I find it really not necessarily sad. I worry for them because what happens when those people aren't there and you have to figure out how to be able to do that on your own.
Yeah.
And you've made it this far into life without having to build that muscle to do those system patches and updates that are necessary for you to understand life isn't always going to be fair, but ownership is something that is inevitable. You're going to have to at some point take ownership of what it is if you ever want to be able to see what it is that you're trying to achieve, whatever your definition of success is. So, okay. All right, well let's start to bring this back around. If people don't take anything else from this conversation, what's one thing that you want people to take away from it? I feel like you literally just answered that, but I always like to ask that question anyway because
I did. I did. But once again, if you don't remember anything, or if you forget everything I said, remember that pressure does not create behavior, it reveals it. We do not rise to our intentions, we fall back on our defaults. And last, when you know your system, the system no longer owns you, you own it.
Okay. My takeaway in this is pressure is not the enemy. It's the most honest feedback system that you have. It's going to show you where the cracks are in your decisions, your defaults, your relationships, how you will serve as a leader. It's the questions that you may try to avoid, but how do you avoid pressure? It's inevitable. It's always going to be something that pops up. It's always going to be something that you have to deal with. And it's showing you, it's like you said, going back to the beginning, it's holding up a mirror. And you can choose not to look or you can look. If you look, then you can see that spot on a shirt. You can do something about the things that it's showing you. And for the people that don't, life has a sense of humor where it's just going to keep presenting the same thing to you in different ways until you take the time to be able to address it and deal with it. So pressure is a learning moment. And I think that's something where once you can start to, one, recognize that it's a good thing, and two, start to figure out how to be able to assess it in real time and do, like you said, sometimes you don't have to do anything. Sometimes it's a matter of saying, acknowledging what it is and saying, "Ooh, this is a pressure situation. How do I want to be able to deal with this?" And you don't have to do it internally. Sometimes you can say it out loud. There are founders that are like, "Oh man, we didn't hit our number this week. We didn't hit our number this quarter. We're gonna have to figure this out." But I'm not gonna put the accountability on you as much as saying the ownership is on me to figure it out. And then we'll have a deeper conversation about how we can get there. So there's a lot of ways to be able to address these things. It's just for me, the one thing I want people to understand and to remember is it's a learning moment. It's to your benefit. It's just you have to be ready to acknowledge it. And when you're ready to acknowledge it, you will be surprised what you can get away from it and how you can improve your life because of it.
I agree.
I will bring it back around to the promise. Now you should understand that pressure is a mirror, not a wall. You know what entry points are, what your default might be costing you, and what your next steps should or could be. The question isn't whether pressure is coming, it's whether you'll be ready to read it and understand what it's showing you. When you can acknowledge it, when you can see it when it's presenting itself, you stand a chance.
Absolutely.
And that's what I loved about this conversation. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to be able to have you on because there are some people out there that feel like they don't stand a chance. And you do. It's just you have to understand what is presenting you and how to be able to navigate those waters. So thank you. I wanted to make sure that we were able to cover those things. Before we close anything out, you mentioned the assessment. Spell it out. Let's make sure that we can they can get it and that they understand anything else that you want them to be able to check out so they have that and it's not just buried in the conversation. I'll make sure it's in the description, but I
Sure.
want to make sure that we close out with what you have going on and where they can learn more and how to be able to take advantage of everything that they've heard and learned from you today.
Okay. So for the assessment, the PSI snapshot is on our located on our website, which is 5stagesofyes.com. The word five, FIVE, stages with the S at the end, it's plural, of yes.com. 5stagesofyes.com. You see the the PSI button, you click on it, and it's going to take you right to the link. Literally, it would take you about 60 seconds. That's the snapshot version. We do have a more dense, in-depth version. That version is for when organizations invite us in to come in and do workshops and different things of that nature, like Georgia Tech. We just did on Tuesday. That was a more in-depth walkthrough of the default responses as well as the pressure entry points. So I'm on LinkedIn, Kashaun Cooper, Kashaun Cooper. That's where I spend a lot of my time on that social platform. I just book just recently dropped. Pressure doesn't create behavior, it reveals it. Why we do what we do.
Very nice.
Thank you. Why you react the way you do when things get hard. Pretty short book. I mean, you can get through it on a lunch break, about 103 pages. Yeah. So once again, if you don't go to the website, the QR code is located here to get to the PSI. So
Hmm.
I enjoyed my time there. Yeah, I'm going to have another conversation on this and delve into some more things, but I enjoyed myself here on the Strategic Thinkers podcast. Thank you, Sean.
Wonderful. I'm going to pause for a second because I feel like there's more to unpack there. And I want to make sure that people truly understand who should be working with you and how to be able to get there. I heard Georgia Tech, so that lets me know that you can most likely work with
Yes,
corporations and institutions. But what about individuals? What about, are you doing group sessions, coaching sessions, anything like that? Because we want to make sure that everybody understands who should be reaching out and when they should be reaching out,
absolutely.
as well as how to reach out.
Absolutely. So, yes, my primary focus is organizations, workforce development space, founders, uh, in an organizational space. But there is a portion of my work where it is group setting and individual coaching. But the bulk of my work does take place with organizations. However, I do have a few slots available for one-on-one coaching.
Okay. So when I hear organizations, it makes me think of HR,
Yes.
who's looking to be able to have retention tools to, when they get employees, they're not constantly trying to hire new employees because they have such a bad work environment that people come, realize what it is, and leave. What's a minimum group that you would work with as far as doing something on the corporate side or
15,
institutions, things like that?
15.
Okay. All right. So I will follow that up and say if you're a business and you have at least 15 employees, then that's something to be able to consider because that's going to be something where you're at the point where you may be either growing or you may be looking to scale. And whenever you add in growth and scale, the pressure automatically starts to present
Intensifies.
itself.
It intensifies.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. I wanted to make sure that we conveyed that part. I wanted to make sure it was as clear as day because sometimes, again, we know what it sounds like internally. We know what I heard. I know what you were saying. I want to make sure that anyone else that perceived it in any other kind of way, now you can't say you didn't know. 15 people or more, uh, HR companies, founders, institutions. There are a lot of people that are trying to put information out there talking about how to be able to deal with pressure. Now you've actually met someone that can actually put a name to it, show you the triggers to it, shows you how it's going to reveal who you are, the cracks, and show you about the patches and the system updates that can allow you to be able to address it in a more healthy way. And it's not just on the corporate side, it's in life because pressure shows up throughout our lives in so many different ways. Make sure that you're in a position where you can do something with it, and it's a judge-free zone,
Absolutely.
which is one of the most important parts. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
For the audience, like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to break this down into a mini series so that you have the pieces and portions that you're looking for. You'll be able to find them in the episodes, and then there'll be the full episode for those that want to be able to just sit down and take all the information in at once. You can take notes and do all the other things that you may want to do from there. So thank you so much. We will be able to pick back up on this, but I want to make sure that I get this out there for people and check out the strategicthinkers.com for any extra links. So it's not just covering what you have with the assessment now, but there are going to be events and things that you're doing in the future. Whenever those things are whenever you have those things, you're always going to be able to reach out. I'll update it on the landing page. So when people go to your profile for this episode or whatever episode, they'll be able to have that information to stay up to date with what you got going on.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Sean.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. And yeah, just be aware, be cognizant. I want to leave you with the thing that I took away from this that I find one of the things that are most important. The distinction between accountability and ownership. There are a lot of people that are ducking accountability, which means that you can't even get to the point of taking ownership and doing anything about it. So um, take this episode. It may not, if it means something to you now, great. If it sounds like something that you heard, but you weren't necessarily seeing how it fit, come back when you're ready to be able to acknowledge and address the things that you want to be able to address. And it will mean just as much, if not more, when you're ready to do something about it. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast. Remember, when you can make the inconvenient convenient, people are willing to pay you for the experience. The better the experience, the more they'll not only pay you, but help others pay you. Serving as brand champions. My name is Sean Atkinson, and I'm wishing you well on your journey to your definition of success. If you find this podcast interesting, helpful, worth a listen, like, share, and subscribe. Leave a positive review so people know to check it out, and I'll see you next time.